our palm branches, right? And Palm Sunday means that it's almost the end. The end is near. Not only the end to our Lent John reading invitation, which I hope many of you have been reading the book of John, but we're going to just have a couple weeks left and we're going to be done, right? But more importantly, Palm Sunday, as Jesus entered into Jerusalem, it signaled that we're close to the end of his life. Okay, the countdown begins now. The countdown begins. Palm Sunday means next he's going to be arrested, and next he's going to be executed, and then next Sunday we're going to celebrate that he comes to life again. So I want us to look this morning, though, on what happens with Jesus, to Jesus, and what Jesus does on the night before Palm Sunday. So we're going to backtrack a little bit. As Jesus prepared for this end, what did that preparation look like? So if you have your Bibles or on your phones, we're going to be reading in John chapter 12. This is the chapter that if you're reading along through our reading program, you'll be reading today. John chapter 12. And we find Jesus in the home of his best friends, Lazarus, Mary, and Martha, in the city of Bethany, which probably doesn't mean much to us, but Bethany is a little town just outside of Jerusalem, about 3 kilometers away. So if you're traveling the major road that goes from Jericho to Jerusalem, your A6 highway of the day, Bethany is the last little village before you get to Jerusalem. It's where his best friends, Lazarus, Mary, and Martha, lived. And they decide to host a celebratory dinner for Jesus. And you just met Lazarus in chapter 11 if you've been reading. And remember what Jesus did for Lazarus. He raised Lazarus from the dead, right? He called him out of the tomb after he had been dead for 3 days. And after that, Jesus disappeared. He went off with the disciples for a couple weeks. And now a couple weeks later, he's back. And of course, Lazarus says, come stay with us and let's have a dinner celebration. Invite all our friends to celebrate you, Jesus. So that dinner is happening the evening before Palm Sunday. And listen to what happens. We're going to read chapter 12, 1 through 11. Okay, it says, 6 days before the Passover, Jesus came to Bethany, where Lazarus lived, whom Jesus had raised from the dead. Here a dinner was given in Jesus' honor. Martha served, while Lazarus was among those reclining at the table with him. Then Mary took about a pint of pure nard, an expensive perfume. And she poured it on Jesus' feet and wiped his feet with her hair. And the house was filled with the fragrance of the perfume. But one of his disciples, Judas Iscariot, who was to later betray him, objected. Why wasn't this perfume sold and the money given to the poor? It was worth a year's wages. He didn't say this because he cared about the poor, but because he was a thief. As keeper of the money bag, he used to help himself to what was put in it. Leave her alone, Jesus replied. It was intended that she should save this perfume for the day of my burial. You will always have the poor among you, but you will not always have me. Meanwhile, a large crowd of Jews found out that Jesus was there and came, not only because of him, but also to see Lazarus, whom he had raised from the dead. So the chief priests made plans to kill Lazarus as well. For on account of him, many of the Jews were going over to Jesus and believing in him. All right, that's what we're going to read about, that dinner celebration, with dinner in honor of Jesus. And Mary, right, the kind of the center of the story is Mary coming and pouring this perfume on Jesus' feet, right? We're going to talk about that. But what she shows, what this story really is about, is she shows her pure devotion to Jesus. Devotion. I want us to think about that word for the morning. To be devoted to something. I looked up the definition in case we didn't know exactly what it means. To be devoted means to have a profound dedication, an earnest attachment to a cause or a person, I can be devoted to a cause, right? I'm passionate about this cause. I can be devoted to a person. I stand beside you no matter what. No matter what. Okay, devotion is truly a heart commitment, right? From the heart. It's what we see in this story. We see it from more than Mary, right? Mary's heart, though, is so devoted to Jesus. But so is Lazarus, so is Martha. Think about what's happening here. Remember, Jesus raised Lazarus from the dead. He went away for a couple weeks. He's back again. But at this time, Jesus is a marked man. He is being hunted by the Pharisees and the religious leaders. They're searching for a way to kill him. It is not safe to hang out with Jesus. It's not safe to say, hey, Jesus, come stay at my house. But that's exactly what Lazarus does. He says, I know that there's a risk. I know it's dangerous, but come stay with me. And not only does Lazarus say that, but it says he threw a dinner party for Jesus, a celebration for Jesus. And in that culture, a dinner party is kind of a public thing. It could be your entertainment for the evening. There's a dinner party going on, and you come and take a look through the window. It's acceptable to do that. So everybody knows that Lazarus is saying, hey, I'm with Jesus, even when it's not really safe. And Martha, who we met earlier in the book, who's a servant heart and a cook, right? She's devoted to Jesus. She says, I'll let everybody see that I'm serving you. I'm preparing this meal for you. I'm honoring you. I don't care who hears. I don't care who knows, because I'm devoted to you, Jesus. And then comes Mary. And Mary comes into this dinner party. And she does this strange thing, right? She interrupts the whole thing by pouring perfume out on Jesus' feet. What a strange thing, right? We kind of scratch our heads and say, that doesn't make any sense, right? Well, let's think about this image for a little while, because what Mary does here, this odd thing, really teaches us about what devotion to Jesus, true devotion, looks like. Right? We learn from Mary that true devotion is extravagant. It goes way beyond what's logical, way beyond what makes any sense. Okay? So this, as you picture this event in your mind, know that what Mary did maybe wasn't as awkward as we picture in our mind. Because dinner parties in those days, you weren't sitting around a table like we sit at today. So you don't picture a table with people sitting in chairs. A dinner party like that, the table was just this really low table on the floor, and you'd lay down to eat around that table. You'd keep maybe on your elbow as you're laying down. Your feet would always be pointed away from the table because you don't want your feet near your food, right? So Mary didn't need to crawl under the table. She didn't need to take off Jesus' shoes. They're all barefoot anyways. So it's not as awkward as maybe we picture. But it truly is a stunning thing that she does. It's stunning in its extravagance. Right? The Bible tells us specifically that this wasn't just any perfume. And when the Bible gives you specific details, you kind of wonder, why this specific detail? It tells us it was pure nard, which is a very expensive perfume. It's imported from the mountains of India. And when you're importing in those days, importing was a big deal, right? And so nard was expensive enough that it was actually a commodity that was traded, like gold. Like we would trade gold. Well, I don't, but maybe some of you do. It's a commodity. It's that valuable. And she pours out the whole bottle on Jesus' feet. Like Judas tells us it's worth a year's wages. So imagine, I don't know what you make in a year, but imagine that somebody takes a year's worth of your wages, however much that is, and if it's in euro, lights a bonfire and throws it in. Poof, gone, poured out, disappeared. That's a big deal. That's a big deal. Right? And so she's pouring out something very expensive. She's pouring out something very special as well. Because nard in that day, if you had a bottle of it, if you were going to use it, not as an investment, but actually to use it, you only used it for the most special of occasions. Those occasions where we would go buy a new suit, or go buy a new dress, or new shoes, or a new necklace because it's a big deal. Well, what they would do is they would break out the nard, and they would use just a little tiny bit. I don't know much about perfume, so I looked it up. Nard is a very strong smelling, a very heavy and long-lasting smell. So you just use a little bit. She pours out the whole thing. So throughout this reading time, as we've been reading the book of John, I've invited you to imagine, as you read, to use your senses, right? And imagine being there. Imagine sitting in that room and smelling. You ever have a bottle of perfume break in an enclosed place? When I was in grade 12, in our classroom, a girl bumped her perfume and shattered the whole thing. The room, you couldn't be in that room. It was so powerful. Can you imagine being here? And she pours out the whole bottle, and the smell just extravagantly overwhelms the whole room. And if you're listening, if you're using your sense of hearing, everybody would have gasped. Look at that. And she just keeps pouring. I'm guessing Judas wasn't the only one who thought, man, that's a lot of money. He's just the one who said it. What Mary does, you need to see. This is not a small deal. It is very costly. Doesn't make any logical sense to do this, right? This is not what you would normally do. She gives her all. She gives her best to Jesus. Pours it all out for him. And then, not only does she show us this extravagance, right? Goes above and beyond. But then she shows that true devotion is humble. Because the next thing she does, it says, is she dries, Jesus' feet are all covered with perfume, and she dries his feet with her hair. She uses her hair as the towel to dry his feet after pouring out this perfume. Now, we talked about this before, so remember that washing somebody's feet in that culture was the lowest of the lowest jobs possible. Nobody would want to wash each other's feet. If you hosted a dinner party like this, if you had a servant, your lowest rung servant would wash everybody's feet as they came up. You certainly would never wash your friend's feet. Lazarus would not wash. Mary should not be washing Jesus' feet. Spoiler alert, next chapter, you're going to see that Jesus washes his disciples' feet. That should never, ever. The master washing the feet of a disciple? Unheard of. But first, Mary does it. She humbles herself enough to loosen her hair, which in that culture, women never loosed their hair in public. That was a sign of an immoral woman. But she says, I don't care what people think. She loosens her hair, she washes his feet, and she bends down and dries them with her hair. She doesn't care what people think because this isn't about her. It's about the one that she loves. It's about Jesus, and she's willing to humble herself completely. She doesn't hold back any of her possessions, and she doesn't hold back any of her person in her love for Jesus. And that's what devotion is, right? Devotion truly is motivated by love. It's true love. Picture Mary sitting there at Jesus' feet, extravagantly loving him and humbling herself. And no, that's exactly where you and I belong, at Jesus' feet as well. Mary's actions are really an invitation for us to examine our own love for Jesus. Are we devoted that way? Are we that devoted to Jesus? Is our love extravagant for him, or is it logical and limited? Right? Is our love humble enough to truly give ourselves away at Jesus' feet? That's a key question. And as I thought about that question this past week, I thought, we really need to understand, if we're going to answer that question honestly, is our love devoted that way? We need to understand the difference between devotion and discipline. Because they're different, but they can look an awful lot alike, right? So they're easy to confuse. Earlier we saw from Mary that devotion is motivated by a heart passion, right? Motivated by love. It's a heart commitment. Discipline, however, doing the right thing, doing what we're supposed to do, discipline is motivated by a head commitment. Right? It's what we know we should do. And maybe for a good cause, absolutely, right? We discipline ourselves to eat better so that we will get healthy. So there I go. I set the goal and I'm disciplined. I discipline myself to go running so that I can finish the 10K that I signed up to run. I discipline myself to study every night so that I'll pass the test that's coming up. I discipline myself to clean my room so that my mom and dad won't get angry at me, right? I do what's right because I know it's right. And that's a good thing, right? But discipline is usually motivated by requirement. I have to do this. I'm checking this off the list. Right? Again, good things. Maybe we can understand the difference best by me telling you about my piano lessons when I was a kid. Anybody here take piano lessons when you were a kid? All right, a few of you. Some of you can relate to the story. When I started piano lessons as a kid, I would go to lessons each week with my brother Dan, who's 3 years older than me. And my brother Dan had been taking lessons for 3 years already, right? So we were both then, after the end of each lesson, the assignment was that you need to spend 30 minutes a day practicing the piano at home. Let me tell you, those 30 minutes a day were the bane of my existence. I hated those 30 minutes. I did not like playing the piano, and I would sit there for those 30 minutes and waste as much time as I can. You can play scales forever if you want, just make the piano make noise, just to get the 30 minutes over with, right? It was a discipline for me. I'm sitting at this piano because I have to, and I'm going to check it off the list, and I'm done. Okay? Now, my brother Dan loved to play the piano. 30 minutes wasn't a problem for him because he would go over his time, and then he'd go back and play again for fun. And he loved the piano. And so it came to him, and he poured himself into it, and he got good at it because he was devoted to it, right? And that devotion motivated him to work harder, to do better, and to love it more and more. So the discipline and devotion went hand in hand for him, right? Let me tell you, with only discipline for me and no devotion, guess how fast I quit? I quit as soon as my mom said I could quit. No love, no passion. Once the requirement was gone, I'm done. My brother Dan worked harder, got better, got his master's degree in performance and composition, and his whole career is teaching music. Right? That's the difference between discipline, I'm doing this because I have to, and devotion, I love this. And don't get me wrong, discipline is not bad, right? Discipline is a good thing. My brother Dan, out of his devotion, became disciplined to practice more and more. It came out of devotion, right? He'll do whatever it takes to get better at something that he loves. In your marriages, I hope as you fall in love with somebody, you discipline yourself to learn to love them even better, right? The disciplines help you. And sometimes disciplines actually grow into devotion, right? Aren't there times when you do something because you have to, and after you've done it for a while, you find out, I really kind of like this. In fact, I really love this. But discipline all by itself will not keep you loving Jesus, will not keep you following Jesus. It can help grow your devotion for Jesus, right? Because what we start doing because we have to becomes a want to. We might begin to read the Bible because we have to, and then find out, I like this, I'm learning. We might begin to pray every day because we think we have to, and then you learn to love it. We might start giving generously because we have to, and then we find out what a joy it is, and I love it. We might start serving and volunteering because we think we have to, and you find out I love it. That's what devotion does. It turns these have-tos into want-tos. That's what we see in Mary. That's what she invites us to with Jesus. And you know what the amazing thing is? Really the stunning thing is? We have a God who's devoted to us. You have a God. We just celebrate Jesus as king, right? This king is devoted to you. He loves you with an extravagant love, with a humble love. We see that in verse 7 of this story. We see the devotion that Jesus has, because when Jesus in verse 7 defends Mary, right? Judas says, hey, that's wrong. And when Jesus defends Mary, he points out in this story the other use for nard in that culture. Right? This perfume nard was one of the perfumes when somebody you loved died, and there's no embalming, right? In that culture, what you would do is you'd wrap the body in spices and perfumes like nard when you buried them. And Jesus says, look what she's doing. She's preparing me for what's to come. She's preparing me for the moment when I show how devoted I am to you, how much I love you. She's preparing for us to see how extravagant Jesus' love is. Think about how extravagant it is. We read this passage a few weeks ago. Hear it again. From Romans 5, at just the right time when we were still powerless, Christ died for the ungodly. Rarely will anyone die for a righteous person. Here's the logic, right? The logic is, rarely will anyone die for a righteous person, though for a good person, someone might possibly dare to die. Here comes the extravagance. But God demonstrates his own love for you in this: while you were still a sinner, Christ died for you. Extravagant love for you. Goes far beyond what makes any logical sense. Completely undeserved. And Jesus' love is not only extravagant, but Jesus' love for you shows him totally humbling himself, right? His love is unbelievably humble. Jesus is God himself, and he humbles himself to die for you. We hear that in Philippians chapter 2, right? It carries us all the way from who he was to what he did. Jesus, being in very nature God, did not consider equality with God something to be used to his own advantage, for him to hold on to and say, I'm not going to let go. No. Rather, he made himself nothing. This is what he did when he became human, right? He made himself nothing, taking the very nature of a servant, being made in human likeness. And not only that, but being found in appearance as a man, he humbled himself again by becoming obedient to death. Not only that, but he humbled himself again by choosing the worst death possible, even death on a cross. Jesus goes way beyond just washing your feet. He lays his very life at your feet. That's how devoted Jesus is to you. Pours out everything. Pours out his life. His love for you is zero have to and 100% want to. He wants to love you. That devotion is what brought him to the cross. That devotion for you is what nailed him there. And that devotion is what raised him up again. Now we're going to celebrate next Sunday. So that you could be forgiven, so that you could be set free, so that you could be welcomed into his presence. He did this all because he wants to spend forever with you. That's devotion. That's love. That you can experience peace for eternity. So if you're doing our reading this week, and if you haven't been reading through the book of John, that's fine. I'm going to give you a new start invitation. I want to invite you to read this week because we're going to do something different this week. Instead of just 2 or 3 chapters for you to read multiple times this week, I'm going to give you the assignment of in a couple days, 2 chapters to read each day, a single chapter each day. Because we're going to walk through this Holy Week through the book of John, and you're going to read the Good Friday story on Good Friday. You're going to read Palm Sunday today. So you can start over now and just read this week if you haven't been part of it. Okay, but what you're going to read is the story of Jesus going to the cross, is the story of God's extravagant love for you, of God's devotion to you. And as you read that, as you see what Jesus is willing to do, either be amazed again. If you've heard the story often and think, I read this before, be amazed again at his extravagant and humble love for you. If you've never recognized that story for you before, be amazed for the first time. Be amazed at Jesus' devotion for you. And then dare to ask yourself, if your love for him is extravagant, if your love for him, if you're willing to be humble in that way, is your relationship with Jesus more about discipline, here's the things I have to do? Or is it more about devotion? Here's what I'm honored to do and I love to do. What might be stopping you from an extravagant love for Jesus? What's stopping you from being humble enough, like Mary, to lay yourself completely at his feet and give him everything? See Jesus' extravagant love this week. And then respond to him with an extravagant love of your own. Would you pray with me?